We're here at the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art at 594 Broadway, just below Houston, for the opening reception of their newest exhibit, Deitch, a Retrospective. It runs through December 5th. We're here talking with the curator of the Deitch exhibit.
That's true. He started on the East Coast, although many of them did. And he kind of delayed his westward journey precisely because he became involved both drawing and editing comics on the East Coast. But he eventually ended up in San Francisco as well.
It was the place to be. And then following his career, it developed from there as well.
That's absolutely true. And the thing that's interesting about Kim's work is if you look at his career, it really spans the history of post-war avant-garde comics. Every format, every milieu, he's been in the middle of it, whether it was underground comics in the 60s, drawing a serialized strip for weekly alternative papers in the 80s, creating his own individual comic book series and one-shots in the 90s, contributing to anthologies like Raw and Weirdo that really kept the comic scene alive in the 80s and 90s. And now, like a lot of other people, writing and drawing graphic novels that are published both by specialty publishers like Fantagraphics as well as major publishers like Random House. So he's been pretty much everywhere. He's done it all, and after 40+ years, he seems to show no sign of stopping.
This stuff was originally done for Raw magazine, but ultimately it ended up being my first, real legit book for Pantheon Books.
Which became The Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
Yeah, which was even the name of the first episode that appeared in Raw. It was going to be a serial in Raw, except that then Art pulled the plug on Raw after we did the first 42-page episode. So then I did it in comic books for Fantagraphics, and ultimately it got all culled together into the Pantheon book.
Again, we revisit Waldo here.
Well, yeah, in a different context, because this story, actually this is where I first started, trying to draw on some of my own life experience, and that I grew up around the animated cartoon business, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, and maybe I should try using it. So while this is fiction, there's an awful lot of real lore about the animation business. Oh, my father pointed out to me, he said, the dysfunctionality of everything going on in here, I think you're projecting like your generation onto our generation, because I don't remember seeing anything, that funky, and he had a point. He had a point.
We're back to fiction.
And he actually really made me say that in an interview we had, at one point, which is okay,
Let's move along the Boulevard of Broken Dreams here, and I think one of the things that I notice is that you are working with two of the original American art forms, comics and jazz. You imbue your work with not only characters who play jazz and little autobiographical or biographical snippets of them, but the work itself has almost a jazz-like feel to it in terms of the music of how you build your panels and your pages. Am I wrong in saying that?
You're standing in front of a pretty jazzy interlude here.
Oh, look, here's an example.
Yeah, so, I'm starting to talk about music too. In Deitch's Pictorama, I've got a story called The Cop on the Beat, The Man in the Moon and Me, which is about music. It's a fake memoir, again, but the actual factoids about music are all real enough.
Yeah, right.
So, well,
you talk about Big Spiderback, you talk about Louis Armstrong.
What happened was, somebody gave me this CD by a guy named Charlie Polloy, who was kind of a Crosby imitator, but nobody knows who he was. The name was made up, outside of the handful of good records he made, nothing is known about him. No photos, no biographical data, no nothing. So I thought, well, it's perfect. I'll create the backstory for this guy. That's basically what that story is all about. So I made up the story about how I meet this janitor, and all that, which is all BS. But it gave me a way to talk about some interesting music, but also put it in a context that maybe people who weren't familiar with that stuff would be able to relate to. You know.
It's also, you know, a little love story.
Well, yeah, but that's completely made up. You know, you know, I did know some girl like that. You know, I did know a rock group like that, but I didn't have a crush on her or anything. You know, this is something I did for a tattooist buddy of mine. That's him, and this is a color rough for a fine art piece I was doing. This is a story called A Shroud for Waldo, which was actually the backstory for Waldo, which turns out that Waldo isn't really a cat at all. He's like a demon from hell in a more or less dormant state, and in fact is the reincarnation of Judas Iscariot. See, there's Waldo as Judas. In fact, there he is morphing back into himself. So that's interesting.
And now, do the Waldo stories actually all tie together, or do you just use this character for whatever storytelling purpose that you want?
Well, they do tie together. Like now that he's got this backstory, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I think what Waldo's got going for him is the fact that I never force one of those stories. I only do a Waldo story when I got a good idea for one. Like right now, he's pretty much officially retired for the moment. I mean, you know,
until I get a good story.
Well, yeah, but that's done.
Which we'll get to. You pretty much.
I might bring him back because I'm thinking of maybe bringing out that one long story that I haven't put in a book, The Search for Smile and Ed, and so I might do one final chapter new with him, but that would be bringing him back sooner than I was really planning to. I figured, why bring him back? I left him with a great girlfriend, a lot of money, you know, he's doing fine, you know.
Happy ending.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for the time being.